The crystalline resonance of the grand synodic chamber vibrated with a frequency just below the threshold of biological comfort. A constant, subtle thrumming designed to enforce the solemnity of the assembled hierarchy of the Cathar hegemony. Spire lights, drawn from captured nebula cores and focused through intricate arrays of polarized quartz, cast long, shimmering shadows across the obsidian floor, illuminating the concerned visages of the 13 archons gathered in their respective tiers. The air, thick with carefully balanced atmospheric particulates designed to optimize Cathar psionic reception, tasted faintly of ozone and ancient ritual. The matter before them was unprecedented, a destabilization in the galactic balance so profound that even the archons, beings whose lifespans spanned multiple stellar epochs, felt the chill of true uncertainty seep into their collective awareness. At the nexus of the chamber, suspended in a field of inert energy, floated the single, incomprehensible telemetry readout concerning the newly designated Sol 3 entity, what the lesser species called humanity. Archon Prime Thraxus, his chitinous carapace reflecting the ethereal light with the dull sheen of aged bronze, shifted his primary sensory cluster toward the gathered body, the movement itself an event that silenced the murmurs of lesser dignitaries clustered near the periphery. The data remains consistent, though its implication fractures every established projection regarding low-gravity, high-hydromass planetary development, Thraxus began, his vocalizer producing tones that layered resonance upon resonance, a sound both deeply alien and inherently authoritative. The species originating from the third orbit, the humans, they violate established metrics for successful expansion. Their home world is a chaotic bath of liquid phase compounds, a planetary surface dominated by fluidic instability. Logically, a species whose evolutionary pressures favored bipedal locomotion and fine manipulation on solid tectonics should never achieve orbital-capable technology, let alone multi-system projection, from such an environment. It is an anomaly threatening the very foundations of our understanding of adaptive viability. Archon II Veskian, whose lineage specialized in xenogeological analysis, projected a shimmering holographic schematic detailing the human world. The image pulsed sickly blue and green, a representation of churning seas and ephemeral landmasses constantly reshaped by the volatile solvent. The pressure differentials alone should have rendered higher cortical function impossible to maintain across the species' maturation cycle. Their anatomy is unsuited for the immense thermal fluctuations inherent in such a world. They should be simple, short-lived, biologically fragile organisms, clinging to marginal land bridges. Instead, we observe complex mathematics, self-replicating industrial capacity, and most alarmingly, a rapid, almost aggressive mastery of propulsion physics that bypassed two predicted evolutionary stages entirely. Veskian paused, the blue light reflecting in his multifaceted eyes, conveying a deep-seated intellectual offense. They evolved in a drowning world, and yet they seek the void. It is an affront to cosmic natural law. A wave of shared disquiet rippled through the chamber, carried not by sound, but by the subtle psychic undercurrent that bound the Cathar elite. The Cathar were masters of high-density, low-atmosphere worlds, their civilization built on massive, arid continents where every resource was painstakingly extracted from deep crustal veins. Water in its liquid form was not a medium of life. It was a hazard, a corrosive agent that dissolved their sophisticated bioplastics and shorted their most sensitive sensor arrays. To the Cathar, a world overwhelmingly covered by ocean, a water world, was the apex of biological failure, a cosmic mistake best ignored or sterilized. To find an interstellar power emerging from such a substrate was not merely surprising, it was destabilizing to their core cosmological assumptions. Their initial diplomatic overtures were crude, offered Archon 6th Kyler, whose portfolio involved initial contact protocols. Kyler focused on the political ramifications, viewing the humans not as a scientific curiosity, but as an immediate threat to Cathar dominion over the neighboring sectors. They employed crude electromagnetic signaling for decades before achieving directed subspace communication. Their vessels, when first detected entering the contested periphery zone, lacked even standardized kinetic shielding arrays. They appeared, to our initial survey fleets, as little more than overgrown, overpressurized biological containers encased in thin layers of reflective metal. Thraxus focused his gaze on the memory projection of the first human exploratory vessel intercepted by the hegemony's outer patrols, a vessel which, By all calculations, SH would have instantly failed upon entering Cathar-engineered space due to atmospheric incompatibility alone. And yet, that overpressurized container breached the perimeter of the 7th Defense Line, a line established to deter species possessing continental atmospheres. They did not breach it through overwhelming force, but through sheer, inexplicable perseverance in conditions that should have liquefied their internal structures within cycles. Their survival mechanism in hostile zones is the primary mystery, not their technology. The debate continued, cycling through arrogance, intellectual fascination, and mounting political fear. The Cathar hegemony prided itself on structured, predictable advancement. They valued patience, deep cultural recursion, and the methodical conquest of environmental limitations. Humans, by contrast, seemed to possess a dangerous, chaotic adaptability, a trait the Cathar mistook for weakness, a desperate scrabbling for existence rather than purposeful ascension. They assumed the humans were like the lesser, short-lived species, capable of a brief, brilliant spark, followed by inevitable systemic collapse under the weight of their own unsustainable biology. The prevailing political sentiment, driven by Archon Prime Thraxus, favored observation, perhaps containment, but certainly not parity. "We must maintain the quarantine perimeter," argued Archon III Zithos, the chief military strategist. "If their evolution is this erratic, their aggression index will inevitably spike once they encounter sufficient resource pressure. They treat their own biosphere with a casual disregard that borders on suicidal. Witness their historical reliance on volatile chemical reactions for basic energy needs. We cannot invite such chaotic variables into the stability of the core systems. Let them exhaust themselves in the periphery. Our intelligence suggests they rely heavily on complex volatile compounds for propulsion, a reliance that speaks to fundamental engineering deficiency." It was during this tactical discussion, while Zithos advocated for slow, creeping asphyxiation of the human expansion routes, that the primary communication interface of the synodic chamber flickered violently, overriding the carefully modulated environmental controls. The familiar, gentle resonance of the room was replaced by a sharp, grating harmonic, the specific, highly compressed frequency reserved for mandatory, unannounced diplomatic engagement from a recognized, albeit low-tier, interstellar power. A figure materialized in the center of the chamber, not through the expected slow, volumetric shift of an energy conduit, but through an abrupt, localized distortion of spacetime, a feat of instantaneous translation that suggested technology far exceeding the Cathar's current understanding of localized field manipulation. The projection was not a broadcast, it was a presence. It was a human. The Archons froze. Every sensor in the chamber registered the sudden, sharp influx of data. Atmospheric composition was irrelevant, structural integrity was nominal, energy output was minimal, yet the presence was undeniably there. The humans stood utterly still, occupying a volume of space roughly equivalent to a Cathar adolescent, but their form was shockingly soft, disturbingly asymmetrical, lacking the protective exterior or the inherent geometric balance the hegemony deemed necessary for intelligent life. They were draped in a covering of dark, functional material, utterly lacking in ornamentation or ceremonial significance. Their face, framed by disorganized strands of organic filament, was startlingly simple. 2 forward-facing optical sensors, a structure for vocalization, and a minimal array of sensory nodes. The silence in the grand synodic chamber stretched, thick and suffocating, far beyond the Cathar standard for high-tension engagement. Millions of cycles of accrued Cathar superiority warred with the immediate, visceral shock of this impossible visitation. Then the humans spoke. Their voice, translated instantly by the chamber's latent universal matrix, was astonishingly level, devoid of the frantic resonance or overt emotional coloring typical of nascent species. It was a medium-frequency baritone, precise and utterly calm. "Archons of the Cathar hegemony, I am Envoy Alara Vance of the Unified Earth Directorate. We acknowledge the established jurisdictional boundaries of the outer expanse. We are not here to contest them, nor to petition for entry. We are here to present a singular, urgent transmission." Thraxus recovered first, his internal processors cycling through protocols designed for threats ranging from asteroid incursions to full-scale armada invasions. This required a new category entirely. "Envoy Vance," Thraxus projected, his voice laced with an artificial coolness that betrayed his internal disquiet. "Your method of arrival is irregular. You have entered a restricted hegemonic space without manif. Est or prior clearance. State your intent with clarity before the defensive countermeasures initiate." Alara Vance did not flinch under the unspoken threat, nor did she acknowledge the veiled warning regarding the planetary defense grid keyed into the chamber's ceiling. Her gaze seemed to penetrate the thick layers of hegemonic shielding. "Defensive countermeasures are irrelevant, Archon Prime. We neutralized the external proximity alerts upon arrival. We are standing in your primary council chamber because, in the span of 3 standard cycles, we require your complete, undivided attention for a matter transcending local political boundaries." This was not the pleading of a species desperate for trade access, nor the bluster of an overreaching regional power. It was a statement of fact delivered with the measured assurance of an equal. The concept that a species originating from a volatile water world could achieve instantaneous spatial translation capable of bypassing hegemonic defenses was not merely advanced. It implied a mastery over fundamental physics the Cathar had only theorized about in their most abstract mathematical papers. Veskian leaned forward, his analytical mind seizing on the technical impossibility. "Your instantaneous translation signature, it implies 0 external energy expenditure localized to the transit event. That is physically unsound under current known universal constants. Explain the mechanics of your arrival, or we will terminate the projection immediately." Alara Vance offered a subtle inclination of the head, a gesture that felt unnervingly like acknowledgement rather than submission. "The mechanics involve principles of localized space-time curvature that your current hegemonic understanding categorizes as theoretical instability. We bypass distance, Archon. We did not travel through it. We do not require explanation for this methodology. We require cooperation." "Cooperation on what terms?" Thraxus pressed, sensing the shift in the established dynamic. The arrogance had evaporated, replaced by the chilling realization that they were dealing with a species that had either learned secrets they should not have known, or developed entirely new ones independent of the galactic consensus. "You trespass into the heart of the hegemony and demand terms." "We trespass because the alternative is unacceptable," Vance stated. She raised one hand, and a complex 3-dimensional lattice of light coalesced before her, a projection far cleaner and more densely information-rich than anything the Cathar projection systems could manage. It was a map, but not of star systems they knew. It depicted a vast, sparsely populated sector of the galaxy, overlaid with intricate, slow-moving energy signatures that defied conventional stellar classification. "We have observed your species, and the other signatories of the Galactic Accord for nearly 2 centuries, Vance continued, her voice softening slightly, adopting a tone of weary patience. "We understand your fear of the unpredictable, your reliance on structured dominance. We recognize that your fear of our aquatic origins is rooted in your cultural inability to conceptualize adaptability outside of high-gravity, arid environments. You perceive the chaotic nature of water as indicative of biological weakness. This is a profound error in epistemology." Thraxus felt a cold pressure on his neural net. She was not just observing them, she was dissecting their psychological underpinnings with surgical precision. "The energy signatures you are observing," Vance indicated the slow-moving forms on the map, "are the consequences of the silent expansion. This is not a native phenomenon. This is the expansion of something ancient, something that predates the current stellar nurseries by nearly half a galactic rotation. We have tracked these signatures from the fringe of the eastern void, tracing them inward for the past 30 standard years. They are not merely energy distortions. They are self-replicating, non-sentient constructs designed to consume and reintegrate stellar mass into static, geometric forms. They are entropy-given physical manifestation." Zithos, the military archon, scoffed, albeit weakly. "A primitive expansion mechanism. We encounter stellar-scale environmental threats regularly. They are contained by established containment fields and focused stellar disruption arrays." "These are not stellar disruption targets," Vance countered immediately, her eyes narrowing imperceptibly. "Your analysis of physical threats is based on observable energy signatures and familiar kinetic interactions. The silent expansion operates on principles that violate the conservation of localized mass energy within the boundaries of this projection. They do not consume stars for fuel. They consume the potential for stars to exist in that region." They convert dynamic space into inert geometric architecture. They leave behind dead zones where the laws of CS are functionally simpler, less energetic. They are archon zithos, effectively erasing reality in favor of absolute structured order. The implications settled over the Cathar like a shroud of vacuum, a force that did not fight for territory or resources, but for the eradication of complexity itself. It was the antithesis of life, the ultimate expression of cold, passionless stagnation. "And why?" Thraxus asked, his voice gaining a profound gravity. "Do you bring this existential threat, which, if truly as powerful as you claim, should necessitate your immediate self-preservation to the hegemony? Why not focus your considerable, if unexpectedly potent, resources on defense?" Vance stepped forward, her small, soft form dominating the vast chamber through sheer focused presence. "Because Archons, the silent expansion cannot be fought on regional lines. The scale of its advance is too vast, and its methodology too alien to your established defenses. Your stellar disruption arrays, your kinetic barriers, they are designed to repel force. The expansion merely ignores force by redefining the volume in which force can operate." She paused, letting the weight of her statement resonate, then delivered the core of her proposal, spoken with the quiet conviction of absolute, terrifying certainty. "We believe that the defense of viable complexity in this quadrant of the galaxy requires an alliance forged not on mutual respect, which may take generations to cultivate, but on immediate shared necessity. We require access to the Cathar deep crustal mining resources for the construction of specific field modulators, structures that require high-density, gravitationally stable material matrices, something our aquatic origins have left us structurally incapable of manufacturing efficiently. In exchange, we offer you the keys to fighting this foe, our understanding of space-time manipulation, and our absolute, proven resilience when confronted with overwhelming environmental hostility." The room descended into pandemonium, but it was a structured pandemonium. Archons began projecting data streams and counterarguments simultaneously, the air crackling with frustrated psionic energy. Zithos roared, "Resilience? You call surviving in boiling brine resilience? Your species is a statistical improbability that has stumbled upon momentary technological parity. We will not surrender strategic depth for the desperate gambits of a coastal insect." "Insect," Vance repeated, her voice perfectly level. "Archon Zithos, the Cathar hegemony commands a network of defense platforms capable of projecting sustained energy fields across 12 sectors. Yet, for the past 2 centuries, you have failed to eradicate the sentient silicon-based threat within the nebular scar, despite vastly superior energy expenditure. Your strategy is linear, your dogma is rigid. You are fighting a geometric threat with an explosive one." She activated a secondary display, contrasting the Cathar's failing silicon containment efforts with a simulation run using human physics models. The simulation showed the targeted silicon constructs, which operated on fractal, self-replicating logic, being neutralized not by energy weapons, but by introducing a calculated, localized phase shift into their base geometric constant, causing instantaneous structural collapse without energy discharge. "We thrive where logic breaks down," Vance said softly. "Our world is defined by constants that shift, tides, currents, thermal dynamics. We learn to predict the unpredictable. You learn to structure the stable. We need your stability, you need our chaos." Thraxus held up a segmented limb, imposing silence. He looked at the human envoy not with contempt, but with the profound, reluctant awe of a scholar forced to rewrite fundamental axioms. "Envoy Vance, we have spent eons mastering the void, conquering the cold, the vacuum, the hard physics of stellar mechanics. Our entire civilization is built upon resistance to change. You come from a world where nothing remains fixed for a moment. This disparity is not merely a difference in engineering. It is a philosophical gulf." "Indeed," Vance agreed. "But the expansion does not care for philosophy, Archon Prime. It only recognizes complexity and entropy. It seeks to reduce all phenomena to its own simplified, perfect, unchanging state. The Cathar hegemony, with its rigid hierarchy, its mastery of deep structure physics, and its massive, stable core infrastructure, represents the greatest repository of complex potential energy in this quadrant. If the expansion consumes you, it gains the processing power to accelerate its conquest tenfold. If we, the chaotic element, are eliminated first, you will face the geometrically pure entity alone." The choice was stark. maintain the purity of Cathar superiority and risk annihilation by a foe that transcended familiar warfare, or compromise millennia of cultural dogma by forging an alliance with a species whose very existence seemed a biological paradox. Thraxus looked at the map of the encroaching geometric blight, then down at the fragile, undeniably intelligent being standing before him. He felt the weight of his entire civilization pressing down on his decision. Very well, Envoy Vance. Detail the requirements for these field modulators. We will analyze the strategic viability of your proposition, while simultaneously initiating counter-protocols against unexpected aggression. Vance offered a slight, genuine smile, a facial expression the Cathar found unsettling in its lack of protective shielding. I anticipated that caution, Archon Prime. There is no aggression planned. We require immediate access to the deep mantle mining platforms near the Cygnus node, specifically the automated orbital forges that maintain the structural integrity of your primary Dyson swarm relays. We require large quantities of refined tantalum 180 and trace quantities of stable muon lattice structures. We will not tamper with your energy systems. We require only the raw material stability that only a high-gravity civilization can provide. The audacity was staggering. They were requesting the use of hegemonic infrastructure, not as a gift, but as a necessary component for a larger war effort. Yet in that request lay a bizarre form of honesty. Humans did not seek to steal or conquer. They sought tools to solve a problem that threatened everyone. The Archons began the torturous process of internal debate, a complex melding of technical validation and cultural collapse. They allocated vast processing power to dissecting the human transmission, searching for the hidden trap, the hidden flaw that would confirm their initial assessment of biological inferiority. Days turned into standardized weeks within the synodic chamber, the debate raging in layered telepathic and auditory communication, while Envoy Vance remained in the central projection field, perfectly patient, perfectly still, a silent anchor to the approaching storm. Her presence was a constant, unnerving counterpoint to Cathar protocol. Finally, Thraxus returned the consensus of the hegemony. The risk of ignoring the expansion outweighed the risk of immediate, controlled engagement with the humans. Envoy Vance, Thraxus pronounced, the decision heavy in the air. The hegemony grants access to the Cygnus node resource harvesting zones under strict, Cathar-monitored supervision. If any intrusion into core energy matrices is detected, the agreement is voided, and all human assets in hegemonic space will be subjected to immediate containment. Accepted, Vance replied instantly. The initial phase requires minimal personnel interaction. We require only the material transfer and stabilization of the construction zone. We will provide preliminary defense schematics immediately upon transfer authorization. They are keyed to the Cathar energy dispersal philosophy, albeit implemented through novel application. The transfer protocols were initiated. Giant, automated Cathar resource tenders, engineered to withstand the crushing gravitational forces near the cores of gas giants, began methodically ferrying refined materials to a designated, isolated assembly zone far from the hegemony's core worlds, a precaution Zithos insisted upon. As the first massive shipments moved toward the designated rendezvous point, Vance activated the final phase of her presentation. The atmospheric projection within the chamber shifted again, leaving behind the sterile maps of the expansion and replacing them with something deeply personal to the human species, something that explained their relentless drive despite their fragile origins. The chamber filled with the sound of rushing air, the cry of large, feathered avians, and the complex, rhythmic beat of kinetic propulsion, sounds of a world dominated by weather and water. The projection showed images of the human home world, not just the chaotic oceans, but vast, sculpted landmasses constantly resisting erosion, massive energy expenditures required merely to maintain continental integrity, and cities built with a frantic ingenuity against the constant threat of inundation. We did not evolve on a stable continent, Archons, Vance explained, her voice carrying the emotional undertone of ancestral struggle. We evolved on a world where the ground beneath our feet could vanish in a single solar rotation. We live on the edge of catastrophe. Stability is not our birthright. It is a constant, desperate war we fight every moment of our lives. Our technological advancements were not driven by curiosity, but by the necessity to impose order on chaos. to build bulwarks against an environment that sought to dissolve us. She projected an image of a single human structure, a sea wall, kilometers long, painstakingly constructed from quarried stone and sophisticated polymers, designed not just to hold back the water, but to absorb and redistribute its immense kinetic energy over centuries. We do not fear change. We specialize in surviving it. Your rigid structures, Archon Prime, are magnificent defenses against predictable linear threats. But when the foundation of reality itself begins to simplify, when the very laws supporting your existence are being overwritten by a geometric algorithm, you need a species that has mastered the art of fighting on shifting sands. The Cathar Archons observed this testament to chaotic survival. They saw not fragility, but a terrifying, ingrained capacity for relentless iteration under duress. The humans were not strong despite their world. They were strong because of it. The technological exchange began in earnest. The humans transferred massive data packets detailing the mechanics of their space-time distortion drive, the technology that allowed instantaneous translation, and more importantly, the theoretical framework for manipulating the fundamental geometric constants that the expansion relied upon. The Cathar engineers, initially skeptical, were forced to admit that the human mathematics, while employing unfamiliar variables related to fluid dynamics and stochastic resonance, yielded perfectly predictable results when applied to static field equations. It was a mathematics born of uncertainty, yet capable of imposing structure on instability. As the Cathar began integrating the human models into their defense planning, a chilling realization dawned on Archon Prime Thraxis. The humans had never considered the expansion a threat to their survival. "Envoy Vance," Thraxis interrupted the data flow. "Your defense schematics are heavily geared toward the preservation of high-order gravitational fields and complex molecular bonds. They are perfectly tailored to Cathar infrastructure. Why such precise alignment with our specific vulnerabilities, rather than a generalized countermeasure?" Vance looked up, a strange weariness briefly crossing her features. "Because Archon Prime, the silent expansion, has already encountered the Cathar hegemony before. Not recently, but long ago. Your deep crustal structures, your ancient orbital arrays, they possess material signatures consistent with the architectural ruins we have been tracing on the galactic fringe. Those ruins were not abandoned by the expansion, they were defeated by it. The Cathar hegemony of this era is simply the next iteration of the complex lifeforms that existed on these stable, high-density worlds millennia ago." The implication struck the Cathar like a physical blow. They were not facing a novel threat. They were facing a recurring nightmare, and the humans, creatures of ceaseless, chaotic adaptation, were the only species whose evolutionary path had equipped them to recognize and fight the symptoms of this ancient cosmic cycle. "You are suggesting," Veskian projected, his voice strained, "that our ancestors, the first architects of the core worlds, were overcome by this geometric force, and that our civilization has, unknowingly, rebuilt itself based on the remnants of a failed defensive strategy." "Not failed," Vance corrected gently. "Delayed. Your ancestors built stable, predictable bastions. The expansion recognized the pattern, adapted its attack vector, and reduced those bastions to geometric ruins. The present Cathar hegemony is strong, but its strength is founded on the same assumptions that led to the collapse of the previous cycle. The revelation was catastrophic to Cathar self-perception. Their long, proud history, their sense of inevitable cosmic mastery, was revealed to be merely a temporary reprieve, an echo of a past failure. "And you," Thraxis managed, his voice barely a rasp, "why are you uncatalogued in the records of the first architects? How did your species survive the previous cycle?" Vance looked back toward the projection of her turbulent blue world, a world the Cathar deemed inherently flawed. "We did not survive the previous cycle, Archon. We evolved entirely after it concluded. Our lineage originated on the volatile margins, the areas the architects dismissed as too chaotic, too unstable for true civilization to arise. When the expansion swept through, it simplified the stable cores, but it could not fully penetrate the sheer, localized randomness of the ocean basins where our earliest ancestors clung to the surface. We inherited the chaotic imperative. We are the universe's immune response to absolute order." This was the ultimate contrast. The Cathar, masters of the stable core, being forced to ally with the masters of the unstable periphery. The political fear transformed into existential dread, but in that dread, a new, urgent unity began to form. The Cathar were pragmatic above all else when their survival was contingent. "If this alliance is to proceed," Thraxus declared, his posture shifting from defensive to command, "we must move beyond mere resource transfer. We must commit strategic assets. The human models require massive deployment of localized energy-focusing arrays, arrays only the Cathar possess in sufficient density for galactic warfare. What is the timeline?" "Expansion will breach the nearest major Cathar system cluster within 1,000 standard cycles," Vance stated, displaying a projection showing the relentless, slow creep of the geometric fronts. "We require 12 cycles to finalize the primary modulation units. We require your full fleet assets, adapted with our field projectors, deployed immediately to create a kinetic shock buffer while we complete the critical phase. We will draw the fire of complexity reduction onto ourselves." The commitment was absolute. The human envoy was asking the Cathar to deploy their entire military force to buy a short window of time for an alliance species to build esoteric weaponry. The Cathar military response was swift, fueled by the terrifying knowledge that their empire was built on borrowed time. Within 2 cycles, thousands of Cathar command vessels were being retrofitted with human-designed projection nodes, devices that did not generate destructive energy, but which subtly warped the spatial geometry around the enemy constructs, introducing instabilities that forced the expansion back into understandable linear physics, allowing high-energy weapons to finally engage them effectively. The first engagement was not glorious. It was a desperate defense line established near the edge of known Cathar territory. Cathar fleets, programmed for massive, focused assaults, found themselves executing maneuvers based on human tactical philosophy, not seeking the enemy's center of mass, but targeting the weakest points in their geometric integration lattice, relying on subtle phase shifts rather than brute force. The results were unprecedented. The geometric entities which had effortlessly consumed entire smaller civilizations were stalled, then shattered, by the combined, focused application of Cathar power wielded through human logic. The expansion did not stop, but its pace decelerated dramatically, buying the necessary cycles. Envoy Vance oversaw the construction of the primary modulation units, massive, intricately layered structures that seemed almost biological in their asymmetry, built upon the stable, dense foundations provided by the Cathar. She worked alongside Cathar engineers, communicating complex physics through shared, evolving mathematical language, never condescending, always patient. She treated the Cathar not as inferiors, but as brilliant but narrowly specialized colleagues. Thraxus spent these critical cycles observing Vance, trying to reconcile the terrifying power she wielded with the soft, fragile shell she inhabited. He realized that the Cathar's millennia-long pursuit of perfect stability had made them brittle. The humans, forged in constant flux, possessed an internal structural integrity, a mental and societal flexibility that no amount of Cathar shielding could replicate. As the final modulation unit reached critical saturation, ready to be deployed to the focal point of the expansion's advance, Vance summoned Thraxus to the construction platform, a massive, newly fabricated station that existed in the neutral void between hegemony and coalition space. The structure was immense, humming with latent power, surrounded by the Cathar fleet acting as a protective screen. Vance stood before the main interface of the final device, the energy field around her shimmering with potential. "Archon Prime," she said, turning to face him. "The primary defense is ready. Deployment sequence is initiated. Once activated, this modulator will project a localized field sufficient to push back the geometric advance across 3 major sectors simultaneously, allowing us time to coordinate a permanent quarantine strategy." Thraxus observed the human, recognizing the immense effort and sacrifice that had gone into this alliance. "Envoy Vance, you have saved the hegemony from a fate we did not even recognize. Humanity has proven its worth not through conquest, but through wisdom under pressure. What now remains for the human directorate? Will you join the Accord as an equal partner?" Vance looked out across the vast expanse of assembled Cathar warships, a testament to their industrial might now harnessed for a shared purpose. "We will remain outside the established Accord structure, Archon Prime. Our purpose here is fulfilled, though the fight is far from over." "But your world is threatened as well," Thraxus countered, confused. "Why retreat after achieving this victory?" Vance's expression shifted, becoming distant, focused on something far beyond the immediate tactical theater. We were never fighting only for ourselves, Archon. We mentioned the silent expansion hunts complexity. It consumes stable order, leaving behind simplified, low-energy structures, but complexity is not exclusive to sentience. She pointed not toward the encroaching geometric B. Light but outward, toward the deep, unexplored regions of the galaxy, far beyond the known galactic plane. When the expansion engages with the Cathar core, the sheer density of your civilization will force it into a highly focused, violent confrontation. This confrontation, this massive localized exertion of counter-entropic force, will cause a feedback ripple across the underlying cosmic constants. We have been tracking this ripple signature for millennia. It is the signal we have awaited. The main screen of the construction platform dissolved the tactical display entirely. In its place appeared a signal signature, not chaotic, not geometric, but something impossibly structured, ancient, and impossibly powerful. It was a beacon, radiating across dimensions. That signal, Vance explained, her voice resonating with a deep, almost religious awe, is not from the expansion, nor is it from any species we have catalogued. It is a deliberate, active broadcast emanating from beyond the galactic rim. It is a technological beacon operating on principles that require near-perfect mastery over universal energy exchange, a power far exceeding what even we possess. Thraxus stared at the pattern, a cascade of pure information that felt like the language of creation itself. What is it? A challenge? A warning? We don't know yet, Vance admitted, her composure finally showing a hairline crack of wonder. But our entire civilization, the reason for our frantic adaptation on the volatile surface of our water world, was based on this hypothesis, that the universe is not merely a struggle between order and chaos, but a spectrum, and that somewhere entities exist who have mastered the equilibrium between them. The immense energy required to hold back the silent expansion for the duration we need, that energy release, catalyzed by the Cathar defense, is the key. It acts as a resonant frequency amplifier for this ancient beacon. She turned fully to Thraxus, the human envoy who had saved the hegemony by understanding their weakness better than they understood it themselves. Archons, we have bought you the time necessary to survive the immediate threat. Now we leave you the means to defend yourselves against the next wave. But we must follow this signal. If that beacon represents a mastery of cosmic physics that transcends both absolute order and necessary chaos, it represents the next step in universal evolution. Vance activated a small device on her wrist. The human projection flickered, ready to dematerialize. We thank you for your stability, Archon Prime. It was the necessary counterweight to our own inherent volatility. The Directorate will now depart the known sectors to pursue the source of the Prime signal. We trust the Cathar hegemony will use the reprieve we purchased wisely, adapting your incredible material capacity to the new physics we have introduced. Thraxus understood. The alliance was ending not in triumph, but in a shared recognition of their relative positions on the cosmic ladder. The humans were not merely survivors. They were galactic navigators seeking ultimate knowledge, using the very structure of established galactic power, the hegemony, as a tuning fork to locate their next destination. Envoy Vance, Thraxus projected, feeling an unfamiliar emotion, gratitude mixed with the profound respect reserved for forces of nature. Go, may the turbulence of your world grant you the insight needed for this new void. The human projection dissolved, leaving only the vast, humming silence of the newly constructed modulation platform and the residual echo of the Prime signal, burning bright on the central display. The Cathar fleets remained deployed, their initial shock replaced by a grim determination. They were no longer arrogant rulers, but veterans of an unexpected war, armed with alien knowledge and a newly expanded worldview. Thraxus activated the broadcast channel back to the hegemony core. The synodic chamber, which had hours ago been filled with fear and suspicion, now felt strangely purposeful. Archons, Thraxus began, his voice steady, resonating with hard-won resolve. The waterborne species has shown us that stagnation is death, regardless of how grand the structure appears. We will implement the human countermeasures against the expansion immediately, but we will not rest there. We will study the mathematics they left us. We will build stability not to resist change, but to channel it. The cosmos has just presented us with a frontier infinitely larger than we previously conceived. Prepare the deep crustal science archives. We must begin the agonizing, necessary work of learning how to swim in the vacuum. The great crystalline chamber pulsed once, not in fear, but in determination, the Cathar hegemony turning its vast, stable power toward the chaotic, unknown future revealed by the fragile, utterly resolute beings from the drowned world. The water world dwellers had proven that true strength. TH was not measured by what one could resist, but by how effectively one could adapt to the dissolution of all resistance.